Good evening, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm Douglas Gwilym in for Laura Blackwell. Daniel Marcus started Story Hour to help people stay connected by telling each other stories. Some of you finding us on YouTube may not know this, but Story Hour has been streaming for almost 5 years. 5 years in a week, isn't it, Daniel?
Just about, yeah.
Yeah. Welcome back to those returning, and welcome to those joining us for the first time. As always, we have two writers reading their own work. Tonight's readers are Christa Carmen and Gregory Frost. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat if you like. Christa Carmen lives in Rhode Island. She is the author of The Daughters of Block Island, winner of the Bram Stoker Award and a Shirley Jackson Award finalist, Beneath the Poet's House, the forthcoming How to Fake a Haunting, the Indie Horror Book Award winning Something Borrowed, Something Blood-Soaked, and the Bram Stoker Award nominated Through the Looking Glass and Straight into Hell. Orphans of Bliss, Tales of Addiction Horror. She has a BA from the University of Pennsylvania, an MA from Boston College, and an MFA from the University of Southern Maine. When she's not writing, she keeps chickens, uses a Ouija board to ghost hug her dear departed beagle, and sets out on adventures with her husband, daughter, and bloodhound golden retriever mix. Most of her work comes from gazing upon the ghosts of the past or else into the dark corners of nature, those places where whirls of bark become owl eyes, and deer step through tunnels of hanging leaves and creeping briars, only to disappear. Welcome, Krista.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I assume my mic's okay and everyone can hear me. All right, well, I'm gonna get right into it. I will just give a really quick, I am like the worst person for story hour because I have things that are either 100,000 words long or like just over the 25-minute mark. So I'm gonna read a couple pretty short things, a couple short stories. And first up is a story called Thirsty Creatures. The trees were fire, and the sky was panicked birds, and the horse was made of bone. She knew the horse would not walk forever. She also knew that when the horse could go no farther, she would trade her hell on earth for one beyond her capacity to conceive. On the day the water turned to poison, she had done the bad thing again. When her father appeared before her, she was certain it was to scold her for her atrocious, perverted ways. But when her father opened his mouth, a river of red ran out in place of reproach. In a revelation of horror, she remembered her father guzzling the glass of water from the faucet, and she gripped her favorite stuffed creature, a gift that she had not deserved, as the gore rushed from between her father's lips, hiding her face in its fur so she would not have to see. She heard the muffled thump when her father's body hit the floor. By then, her brother had drunk the water too. By then, who hadn't? And when he saw their father in a frothy sea of unrelenting red, he opened his mouth to scream. His insides came out instead of sound. She watched as the mundane setting of their living room became an estuary of brackish blood, her brother's red mixing with her father's. The book that had taught her about brackish water and estuaries and other interesting scientific things lay open on her desk upstairs. It would remain there now, for an eternity, unless the water cleared and there was anyone left to drink it. When the bottled water had been reduced to a wasteland of empty plastic, she braced herself to venture outside. Outside, where the world rained ash and the wind blew pain. It was also where the well ran deep, and if she was lucky, ran clean. She was desperate for a drink, but recalled the book on her desk extolling the scientific method and the testing of hypotheses. With her tongue like a shed carapace in her mouth and her innards like sand in a sieve, she crouched behind the stone wall and settled in to observe. When to delay another second would be a fate worse than what waited for her in the kitchen tap, a raven fluttered down to perch on the bait. A bucket of water exhumed from the well's depths. The great black bird lowered its head to sip and splashed water over its wings. She held her breath, waiting for a rivulet of red to spew from its throat to rack its fragile, feathered body. The raven opened its beak, but only a song emerged, and she wept with relief. The salty tears made her thirstier than ever. She filled every container she could find with unspoiled water from the well. An old tomcat mewled and hissed and spat, and though she lamented his misfortune, she could not share such a precious commodity with a cat. She reminded herself that she was wicked and depraved, and this allowed her to stomach her cruelty more easily. She carried bucket after bucket of crisp, cool water to the barn, delivering the stores to a single stall. Encompassed in that narrow space was her father's former show horse, the strongest horse on the farm, of the most impressive breeding, the horse that would fare the best when it came time to abandon their home. Without water, the milk cow and the donkeys and the other horses fell. Their already dehydrated corpses withered and shrunk, their eye sockets widening to gaping, fly-infested chasms. She was not privy to the noises their bodies made when they collapsed, but she imagined they sounded like her father had, like her brother. All things sounded the same when they fell in death. The morning the well ran dry, the air was thick and smelled of sulfur. She tacked up her mount and filled the saddlebags with bottles and canteens. She left the farm, not bothering to say goodbye. She did bring along her favorite stuffed creature, holding it before her on the horn of the saddle, a sleight of hand to delude herself into believing she did not ride alone. The earth was blood red and bone dry. She saw no one in the weeks and months after setting out, would have almost welcomed the inconvenience of defending her water supply from fiend or foe. With no one to contend with, the caches of hydration were infinite. Abandoned grocery stores reigned over empty parking lots, and households were rife with bottles of uncontaminated liquid, foregone by the fallen for the poison-spouting spigots. There were no budding blossoms or kaleidoscopic foliage with which to judge the passing of the seasons. The horse had long become accustomed to the endless road, its body changing, shifting, ridding itself of useless things like tissue and muscle and flesh. Now the once show horse was a chrysalis of dust and bone, its ribcage a steel trap that held its heart hostage. Her own skin had fused with the horse's hellish hide. She had ridden the wretched beast to the ends of the earth and back, and would repeat this journey over and over, with no end in sight. The stuffed creature, too, persisted, its body worn to nothing by the friction of her hands, its face erased by kisses from parched lips. It was a tether to the past and a clue to her future. The faceless, nameless being, a blueprint for her soul. At first, she prayed to the deities of water, of wells, of springs and fountains and rivers, to the god and queen of the sea. She pleaded with them to release her as they had all the others. But she knew that to pray was to sin, for she knew her punishment was just. It was her fate to have all the water in the world and no way to douse the fire. Time disintegrated, and it came to her that she had not required a drink in as long as she could remember. Somewhere along this purgatorial path, she had ceased to possess those qualities that made her human. Water was no longer essential. As it were, every drop had long since dried up. Her thirst, however, was torturous and vast. If she could only take back the bad thing, she'd have done so in a heartbeat. She would have drunk the poisoned water in her brother's place 1,000 times over, and the river of red would have poured from her mouth in place of all her lies. But The trees were fire, and the sky was panicked birds, and the horse was made of bone. And she was one with the horse, an empty web of regret. Like the stuffed creature in her arms, her last link to a long-gone world, she was faceless, formless, and so very, very thirsty. Right. See. All right. I'm going to read the next story I'm going to read is called Shadows. I've never been much into astrology, but there's something to be said for a Cancer coming home. My home is special. It's my happy place. It's all chenille throws on the love seat and hot cups of chamomile with honey. It's French toast breakfasts and afternoon naps with the corpulent canine. And tonight it will be a movie with my husband and a delicious, drawn-out good night's sleep. I follow Bennett up the stairs, the hum of the garage door still reaching my ears as it closes. In the kitchen, I shrug off my coat, slide our leftovers into the fridge, and head for the bedroom to change. I join Bennett in the living room 10 minutes later, where I experience the first walloping sensation that something is wrong. Did you push the couch back further along the wall? I ask him, surveying the room, feeling altogether foolish, but nevertheless certain that something is not as we left it when we went out earlier that evening. Something seems strange here. Bennett looks at me like I am what is strange, his glassy red-rimmed eyes narrowing before returning to the Netflix categories cascading down the screen. Unexpectedly, I am assailed with a flash of light and the screeching of tires, and my gaze shoots to the television too, anticipating a teaser trailer for some new action film. But Bennett has nodded off with the cursor on the last film he considered. That trailer has ended. No new trailer plays in its place. The light and sound were in my mind, I think. Some sort of flashback, a memory. I shake my head to dispel this bizarreness. Of course, the sound of screeching tires is not a flashback. How could it be? A chill clings to my bare neck, and I shudder, wishing I grabbed a scarf before coming in from the bedroom. I glance at Bennett, slack-jawed in his slumber, snoring and angled haphazardly across the cushions, and swallow my annoyance. I had nothing to drink at dinner, no martini to complement any of the half-dozen that Bennett partook in, no shot of limoncello to wash down the meal. Why had I let Bennett drive? There's often a sobriety checkpoint on the way home, the restaurant being near the casino like it is, and yet I allowed Bennett to maneuver the 10 miles home on unlit roads, past long stretches of farmland and wooded areas, before our small, well-illuminated town appeared within our windshield. It seems a miracle now that we made it home without calamity. We had made it home without calamity, hadn't we? Another flash of light, this one coupled with a scream that sounds in my head as if the screamer's mouth is pressed against my ear, blood curdling and anguished and somehow horribly familiar. I gasp and raise my hands reflexively. The sense that something's wrong intensifies. Like a woman in a nightmare, I approach the left wall of the room. The pictures hang straight, the light bulbs are all working, but my stomach feels like a barrel of wine poisoned by a half-decayed rat. The anxiety increases. Everything, my sleeping husband, cozy home, the lighting and the temperature and the far-off sound of the refrigerator humming feels suffused with imminent horror, like a threadbare rug has been laid over the newest entrance to hell. I ate a bad clam, I decide, despite the linguine dish having tasted as it always did. I'm merely passing into some sort of sickness into which psychological symptoms exist alongside physical ones. I spin 90 degrees, then back the way I came, and that is when I see it. It is on the wall to my left, but it's not a crooked photograph. It's the shadows darkening the wall's smooth surface. The shadows do not match the shapes of the furniture in the room. The shadows are of things that have never been in this room, that have never been in this world. They stretch and open into cataclysmic fissures, depicting the shapes of monsters and of men. The shadows shift even as I gaze upon them. Now the bodies twist into horrible grotesqueries. Bones break, skin splits, mouths pull into exclamations of torment. The shadows dissipate like smoke, but are instantly replaced. They shift again, and a new scene plays out across the pale gray paint, as if Bennett has awakened and chose a film after all. A long stretch of farmland, and a car that speeds along a perilously winding road. A little girl hurrying to wheel a tricycle across the street toward home. Too late, the car swerves. The girl is tossed into the air, becomes another shadow, a body untethered from the earth. A scream sounds in my head, as if the screamer's mouth is pressed against my ear, blood curdling and anguished and somehow horribly familiar. It is my scream. It's the scream I screamed when Bennett barreled into her, when her blood slicked the windshield like rain, and I sat in the passenger seat in comfort and complicity, too unconcerned with everything but my own internal world to have insisted that Bennett not get behind the wheel. I am screaming now. Bennett twitches. The room melts away, paint peeling from walls, plaster peeling from studs. The floor beneath my feet grows hot. The hallucination of my cozy home will persist no more, and I know, the way I hadn't known 1 hour earlier, that the path of least resistance is, in fact, no path at all. We will not be permitted a singular torment. We'll continue the charade of coming home again and again and again, only to have that home dissolve into an inferno. It's a mirroring of the little girl with the tricycle, you see, your safe space made treacherous, the feeling that you've almost made it across the street before you're torn in two. In a way, however, Bennett and I are still home, a pair of devils come home to hell. I'm going to read one more. That's a little, I think it's a little more fun, but that might not mean much with all the darkness that I'm reading. Okay, control 7. I should have used a bookmark. All right, this one is called What Are Little Girls Made Of? Sugar and spice and everything nice. At least that's what the nursery rhyme says. Constance and Michael Tiverton had always believed that particular verse. When they had their first child, however, a daughter they named Nadia, they became convinced that little girls were made of worry and fright of things that go bump in the night. Though Constance and Michael both had anxious dispositions, Nadia gave new meaning to the term worrywart. As a toddler, Nadia bit her nails and twirled her hair, sucked her thumb and chewed her lip. By her 5th birthday, she'd shed those more benign habits in favor of what would be her primary method of self-soothing. The doctors called it excoriation, a type of impulse control disorder characterized by the repetitive and compulsive picking of the skin. Picking that could result in tissue damage if the sufferer was unable to control his or her symptoms. Nadia's parents called it what it looked like, picking, and had lost count of the number of times they'd been forced to say, Nadia Tiverton, if you don't stop picking at your fingers, you'll pull every inch of your skin clean off. When Nadia started kindergarten, everything from the weather to the mood of the family's capricious cat could send her into a spiral of worry and despair. Once, when a hurricane warning kept her class indoors at recess, Nadia became so convinced of impending disaster, of the classroom's big bay windows imploding in a shower of glass, of the storm reaching in its giant, terrible hand of wind and rain and lifting her out, up, and away, that she'd peeled massive strips of skin off each of her fingers before Miss Wendy could inform them that the hurricane had been downgraded to a regular old tropical storm. On the day Nadia was to make her first Holy Communion, such was her nervousness at the prospect of walking down the aisle before God and the rest of the congregation that she spent the moments before Mass working a dangerously substantial flap of skin loose. The depression in her thumb was so deep it issued forth a stream of bright red blood that soaked the front of her heretofore pristine white dress. Her mother, father, and the entirety of French Creek Church were horrified by the sight of 7-year-old Nadia walking down the aisle, pale and trembling, covered in blood, and looking for all the world like the murder victim of a violent ghost who'd called the Narthex home. By the time Nadia entered high school, there wasn't a student, male or female, who had not experienced firsthand the fallout of Nadia's gory habit. Unlike Nadia's parents and most of her teachers, her classmates were neither kind nor diplomatic in their suggestions that she refrain from picking at her skin. "Here comes Nadia," the girls would sneer in front of the locker room mirrors, as they smeared gloss across their lips and rolled up their shorts in preparation for gym. "Hurry up and open the tampon machine. She'll need 10, one for each finger." On the field, while Nadia picked at her cuticles and waited to be chosen last for softball, lacrosse, soccer, the boys would sing under their breath. "Little Miss Nadia, French Creek's biggest freak. She'll pick her fingers and spring a leak. Don't follow after her to use a bat or ball, 'cause you can bet it'll be a bloody free-for-all." Or, "Miss Nadia Tiverton in a blood-speckled dress could get none of the boys to touch her chest. If ever a boy dared to look her way, she'd open up a wound and the blood would spray." At night, alone in the dark, the fingers of one hand tearing at the fingers of the other, blood splattering the once white sheets, Nadia would promise herself there'd be no more picking. She'd curb the horrible habit once and for all, starting tomorrow. But each morning, as the first beams of sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, thoughts of war and death, of losing her parents in an accident or getting kidnapped, of plummeting college acceptance rates and fake news and politics and nuclear weapons, Nadia's fingers would react to her fears, first by scratching, then by prodding, then pinching and peeling and pulling and picking and tearing, until the prospect of a day without bleeding slipped through her fingers like sand, as impossible to believe in as glass slippers or fairy godmothers. By the start of her junior year, Nadia Tiverton had been to the emergency room 6 times for self-inflicted injuries so serious they required stitches. On her 16th birthday, at which no one but her cousin and the daughter of her mother's friend from next door showed up, Nadia wished her parents' admonishment, "You'll pull all your skin clean off," would just come true. Maybe if she stripped herself of every square inch of skin, all her impulsive worrying would cease. The thought dissipated along with the smoke from the 16 birthday candles, +1 for good luck, but Nadia found it returned more and more as time wore on. The thought revisited her as her fears ballooned, as those troubles resulting from her excoriation disorder grew. Most of Nadia's nail beds were so damaged from the constant trauma that the fingernails had fallen out, and once gone, refused to grow back. The few nails that remained were discolored and malformed, yellowed and ridged from years of abuse. Fingers themselves were a nightmare of scars and had the shriveled, shrunken look of flesh left too long in stale water. Nadia hid her hands from the prying eyes of others whenever she could, donning gloves in the winter and stretching shirt sleeves over fingertips to the point where the fabric shredded. But these were temporary barriers only, erected to delay the inevitable, a shaky dam at the mercy of a pummeling river, the eye of an ever-present storm. In the spring of her junior year, Nadia's classmates began to exude excitement over the impending prom, like voracious shrews emitting a heavy, heady musk. Nadia had no delusions that an invitation to the dance was in her future. She'd never attended a sleepover, never gasped over a shared bowl of popcorn at the latest slasher flick. But she knew who Carrie White was, and the blood-covered prom dress was not a look any girl aspired to. The night of the dance, after insisting to her parents that she was fine, she didn't want to go out for ice cream, didn't want to play cards or watch television, or submit to any of the other well-meaning distractions they proposed. She sat at her vanity and inspected herself in the mirror. She tried to picture herself in a fancy dress and held back her hair, imagining the way a stylist could have manipulated the golden tendrils to fall just so. The lumpy gauze around her fingers ruined the effect. With a whimper, she let her hair fall back to her shoulders. Still staring at herself in the mirror, she started unwrapping the bandages piece by piece. What are little girls made of, she thought, adding another piece of gauze to the pile beside her. Perhaps the girls at the prom are made of sugar and spice and everything nice, but surely I am not. Fingers liberated, she gripped a flap of skin. Surely I could see what I am made of if I could just get a look beneath my skin. Nails squeezing the wayward tissue, Nadia pulled. The skin pulled away from the muscle in a wide, neat strip, crested the fingertip, and continued peeling, as if Nadia was yanking at the finger of a glove she no longer wished to wear. What are little girls made of? She thought again, rather wildly. Of worry and fright and things that go bump in the night. Adjusting her angle, she pulled again, and the skin around the second finger gave way. Of muscle and bone, she sang to herself, and the terror of being alone. The skin that had covered the rest of her hand came away easily enough. With a jerk, the entirety of the skin encasing her arm followed suit. Of tendon and blood, she said, now out loud, and of washing away in a flood. The skin around her shoulder pulled free with a wet, ripping sound and took the top portion of the skin across her chest and stomach with it. The skin of her second arm went after that, which allowed her to use both hands now to pull. She stepped out of the skin that sheathed her legs as if bidding farewell to an old pair of pants. Of disappointments and fears and of too many tears, Nadia gripped the flap of skin at the base of her neck. She set her jaw, closed her eyes, and pulled. The upward motion, the removal of the mask, was like that of a younger Nadia on a past Halloween, but oh so much more gratifying. At the point of her closed eyes, the skin caught, resisted, threatened to hold fast. She grunted and pulled harder. The last of the skin tore free. Nadia Tiverton stood, a crimson statue of raw and gleaming muscle at the center of the room. She smiled at her reflection, at the fact that there was at last no more pesky skin at which to pick. Every inch had been pulled clean off. She walked out of the bedroom, downstairs, and through the foyer toward the door. Nadia, is that you? Her father called from the living room. Sweetheart, her mother said, where are you going? I'm going to the prom after all, said the girl who had no skin. To be sugar and spice and everything nice, and a girl who is trapped no more. And with that, she opened the door and stepped out into the night.
Thank you, Krista. It is the custom here, correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, to take a moment and let it wash over you. In this case, maybe recover a little. What a journey you've taken us on with those three,
Yeah,
Krista, from
truly.
uh, the darkly poetic through the cosmic, and landed us in the body horror and humor. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Um, Next up, we have Gregory Frost.
Yeah, follow that.
I know the feeling. This
Yes, of
show is
course.
great for setting you up for this kind of thing, Gregory.
Of course it is. Yes.
Um, Gregory Frost is a writer of fantasy, horror, and science fiction. His latest novel is Rhymer Hood, the second in a three-book series involving the ballad character Thomas the Rhymer from Baen Books. The third volume, Rhymer Hell, due out May 10th, is available for pre-order at Baen Books. His latest story collection, Beyond Here Be Monsters, is available from Fairwood Press in bookstores and online. A new horror novel, The Secret House, from Journalstone, is due out in June. Novels and short stories of his have been finalists for the World Fantasy, Stoker, Nebula, Hugo, James Tiptree, International Horror Guild, and Theodore Sturgeon Awards.
Okay, very quickly, because this is probably going to devour all 25 minutes. Like Christa, I'm one of those people who doesn't write short, doesn't write. It's either very short or it's really long. You want it. So this is a story called Allende. It originally appeared in Weird Tales, and it's in the collection you just mentioned, Beyond Here Be Monsters. Mild content warning here. This is a story about psychological spousal abuse. And on that note, Allende. Jesse stares into the front corner of the Packard, at the crank handle for the side window, at the triangular vent window that's pushed open to let in air, at the built-in clock in the polished dash. Her face burns as if she's been slapped on both cheeks. She knew this is what would happen. Why did she voice an opinion at all? Floyd, behind the wheel, comments that he didn't really expect a stupid bitch to grasp the situation. The situation being that he's pulled out a tatty hand-drawn map that belonged to his grandfather, for whom he's named. It's a shortcut map to Lake O, name elided, that he claims will shave an hour off their trip. Floyd's people have been coming here for decades. There used to be a family cabin on the lake, but when an uncle got into financial trouble during the war, they had to sell it. This is only the second time he's brought Jesse north in the 4 years they've been married, and the first time to Lake O. She's earned it by being properly obedient, but look how quickly she slips up. That he suddenly brandished this map should have told her the matter of whether or not to take the shortcut was already decided. But her instincts for self-preservation lag just behind her desire to have a say in what they do. Probably if they weren't so far along, he would have turned the car around to punish her. She hates herself for it at the same time. She craves his benediction. Floyd hasn't hit her ever. That's not the way of his control. In order to wave the map while he shouts about her stupidity at not seeing immediately the wisdom of his alternate route, he has stuck his large cigar in the ashtray. In a minute, in the sullen aftermath, he will pick up the Corona and, waiting for the lighter to heat, renew his disparagement of her for having caused it to go out in the first place. Yes, it's all entirely her fault. That's his way of control. He works the details to ensure that she's complicit. To relight the cigar, he has to put down the map. She hazards a glance over her hunched shoulder, looks at it on the seat. It's a folded piece of paper with pencil lines on it that he hasn't shared with her, which is typical of him. It's a test of her faith in and reliance upon him. Hardly the first, and nothing in the world could compel her to question it at this point. She returns to staring at the corner. The Packard is a handsome car, plush and well appointed. It's just the sort of car for an important doctor like Floyd. Back when she was a nurse, he courted her in it, taking her to dinners, to films, to hospital fetes. Every day she had observed him with all of those pregnant women whose babies he was about to deliver. His bedside manner was so tender, so compassionate, and that's what she fell in love with. There was no way to recognize then that the caring persona of Dr. Floyd Ensley, like the white coat he wore, was merely veneer, nothing more than the outward expression of a man who knew himself to be of peerless stock, never to be disputed or questioned. If he has in his possession an alternate route, then it is a given that this is the best possible course to their happy holiday cabin. And so an hour north of Brainerd, they turn off the two-lane highway and onto a narrow dirt road that has been oiled to keep cars from kicking up dust, at least for the first half mile. After that, it abruptly turns to plain dirt with dips and valleys of pure juddering washboard. After that, no other cars join or pass them. They would have to negotiate passage with oncoming vehicles, but there are none. The thick pine forest scents their way, deep woods press in from both sides. At one point, a string of ancient, seemingly abandoned cabins is visible through the trees on the right. Beyond the cabins, she catches glimpses of diamond bright water, some other lake than theirs. But then Minnesota is the land of 1,000 lakes, and most of them seem to have formed in the north. The press of trees makes it feel as if the day has gone dark and cloudy, though Jessie knows it's not. She considers saying as much as a way back into normalized communication, but then she realizes it isn't worth the trouble, for his reply will surely include some carefully clothed derogatory remark, see how well we get along when you aren't an idiot, line couched in language that leaves no opening for objection. No, better to sit on the bench seat watching upside-down images scroll over the polished mahogany dash, a flowing terrain dissociated from the one outside. Better to remain silent with her arms wrapped around herself until Floyd has traveled as far from that vituperative moment as possible. She must have fallen asleep, because she comes to against the burgundy door in time to witness the sign of Elende population 268 glide past. Floyd acknowledges her alertness with town up ahead. We're going to stop and gas up, though the cabin can't be but half an hour now. She wipes a ghost cobweb off the side of her face. He says, this map's not drawn very to scale, is all I can say. It looks like we should have reached it a while back. His tone holds a breath of apology. Not acknowledgement that she was right in anything, but that he's conceding his grandfather's unreliability. Nothing to do with him at all, of course, just one more person who's disappointed Floyd. The town of Allende proves to be a main street and not much else. It has one Sinclair gas station on the far side with one skinny green pump. Nobody is there to operate the pump. Nobody is inside the unlocked station. Floyd walks around behind the place, comes back, finally opens the door and enters. Jessie stands beside the Packard and listens. Towns make noise, even with a population of only 268. Not this one. It's as silent as a snowfall. No pine trees whish, no birds are calling anywhere, no deer flies buzz around. Directly overhead, a sun halo hovers like the eye of God. It's a cool, wispy, clouded day, and there's not a living thing anywhere. End of the world, she thinks. Floyd emerges from the station building. There's money in the till, he says. I can't believe they've just gone off. With that, he considers the pump hose. She can see that he's trying to recall how the boy does it at the service station where he buys his gas. He lifts the nozzle, inserts it, and then starts filling the Packard's tank. Jessie wanders out onto the road. Main Street is dirt with some gravel in it. She walks away from town, passing the final side streets, all of which seem to dead end after a block or two. Just as Floyd calls her name, she comes upon the signs. They're small and weathered, the kind of homemade signs you'd see for roadside produce stands in northern Iowa. The first says lake with an arrow, which strikes her as funny. Wouldn't everybody in town know where the lake is? It isn't as if it can move around. The second sign reads carnival. Its arrow points the same way. Footsteps behind her, then Floyd grabs her by the arm. Where are you going, Jessie? She indicates the signs. That's probably where they all are, don't you think? He squints at her, at the signs, trying to make up his mind if he wants to be vexed or not. Then says, of course that's where they are. Of course it is. As if the conclusion was his all along. Come on, then, get back in the car. Did he pay for the gas he pumped? She cannot be certain. He's both usually honest and ruthlessly cheese-paring. He might easily rationalize that the gas station owner should have locked up properly if he didn't want to provide free gas. Jessie finds it interesting that for all he wants to get to the cabin, after some 7 hours of driving, he now turns left and heads for the carnival and the lake. Maybe he wants to find the owner of the Sinclair station and pay him. But she suspects that he's as curious as she is about the empty town. Of course, he'll never admit it. The road here is not oiled either, and the car kicks up a cloud that hangs and slowly drifts behind them. Neither destination seems to be all that close. Enclosed by woods again, they drive up over a rise before they get their first sight of either lake or carnival. The woods ahead give way to a broad sward on which a half dozen large tents have been pitched. It looks to have been someone's neglected field on the way down to the lake. The road just runs out, becoming a path well before they reach the first of the tents. Floyd stops the car and shuts off the engine. The carnival appears as desolated as the town. The tents look as though they were put up 20 years ago, weather-beaten, mildewed, and trimmed in faded paint. They're the carnival version of Allende with not a soul in view. Floyd needs to turn around and go back right now. Jesse no longer cares where the town is lurking, no longer wants to meet them. What's a shortcut if you don't stick to it? The question rides on her tongue just inside her lips, but years have taught her not to verbalize it. Silent, she prays hard that he'll be infected by her dread and act. Instead, he says, let's go see, as if this is a mere detour into rustic tourism, as if the tents promise a bearded lady and a dog-faced boy a show. He gets out of the car and Jesse thinks, doesn't he hear them? Doesn't he hear the voices? Which is the point at which she acknowledges that she is hearing them, hearing voices like ancient parchment, crumbling and dry, tickling her brain with an almost language, syllables and vowels, but in the wrong order. A whispered, discordant babble that floats beneath the hissing of the breeze. Nevertheless, she gets out of the car and sets off after him, calling, Floyd, wait! He's entered the nearest tent, the largest one, big enough for a 3-ring performance. She reaches the open flap and almost gags from the stench of something rotting inside. It recalls to her the war, triage, and gangrene. She shudders. There's no light within, but enough daylight enters the open flap that her eyes quickly adjust to the dimness as she covers her nose and mouth. There is something in the center of the tent, weird and sharp, angular and bony like some abstract statue. Only when she draws nearer can Jesse comprehend the shape. It's been assembled tier by tier out of animals that might once have performed in this tent. Somehow the bones are interlocked like a cleverly assembled puzzle, stacked and joined into a thing 15 feet high with short arms and an antlered skull at the top. It's like a rood, but without a Christ. Sweet Jesus, says Floyd. He stares transfixed. Look at this, would you? Finally, they seem to share the same unease. We should go, she urges. He twists around, gives her that look. And she wonders, what did she miss? Isn't getting out of here the right answer, the one they just agreed upon? Listen, he tells her. We're not going anyplace until I understand this. This thing didn't build itself. Farther back in the darkness is a mound, source of the terrible stink that she guesses is the flesh and muscle of all the creatures sacrificed to build this freakish totem pole. Terror compels her beyond being further cowed by his bullying. Who cares who built it, she says. Don't you hear the voices, Floyd, in your head? I don't care. Even as he says this, they grow louder, as if the mephitic stink of shredded and stripped flesh is wedded to the chant. It's the call, he says absently, as if reminding himself. Then he walks on through the tent as if towards the lure of it. Jessie runs after him, but not as fast in her bareback pumps and long polka dot skirt that Floyd picked out for her for the trip. He weaves a path around the next tent and out of sight. Following, she catches up to him because there on the far side he has stopped dead. Past the final tent, the ground slopes to the lake. Cattails and reeds line most of the bank, except where the path arrives at a small beach, off which an old rickety dock extends over the water. On the dock stands perhaps a quarter of the populace of Allende, most of the rest dotting the narrow beach, all softly chanting. 5 are standing waist deep in the lake itself, in a line extending from the dock. Even now, someone else jumps in off the dock and takes a place at the end as someone else wades ashore. At the head of the line stands a figure in a purple robe with pointed hood and holding high some sort of oddly shaped iron instrument. This priest slaps his hand upon the forehead of the woman before him and shouts out in some babbled language that's sliding through Jesse's head, syllables that echo across the lake. Then he pushes her underwater. Jessie thinks, dear God, it's the Klan. We've stumbled into a Ku Klux Klan initiation. She hisses, Floyd, we need to get out of here now. Clouds are amassing over the far shore. If this ritual below isn't unholy enough by itself, a storm looks to be rising in response to it, and something far out is churning the surface of the lake. Jessie clutches his sleeve. Floyd! She tugs urgently, trying to turn him. And that's when two more people emerge from the last tent, also adorned in ritual robes. They gawp at Jessie and Floyd. There's something horribly wrong with them both. Their faces are narrow, as if the sides of their skulls have been pushed together. She thinks of angelfish viewed head on. Then one of the two cries, Hey, Rube! And everyone on the beach and dock below turns and looks up at them. It isn't just the two nearest creatures. The entire goggling population are the same, mostly chinless, some of them plagued by swellings like goiters at the throat. As a nurse, she has seen textbook examples of congenital deformations, enough to know that she's beholding the result of a closed breeding pool that is interrelated for decades, if not centuries. She can't be sure of the ones in the water, especially the baptized. The woman has arisen with her features in motion, flowing, gray, wriggling, exactly like the face of the man wading out ahead of her. Her arms too, but it's a moment before Jessie identifies what she's seeing. Leeches, to which the baptized seem oblivious, have attached to them. It's not just humans who've heard the call. The first time she came up north with her husband, a huge leech attached itself to her while she was swimming. It was a gray ribbon of a thing, 6 inches long, like some grotesque animal's severed tongue. And Floyd had to use ammonia and finally his cigar lighter to get it to release. It left a huge bleeding circular pucker on her calf, and they killed it by burying it in the sand. The people dipped in the lake are vampirically infested with them and don't even seem to notice. The hooded priest shouts more gibberish, a command this time, and the two creatures grab hold of her and Floyd and drag them down the slope toward the dock. Floyd doesn't begin to struggle until they're almost on the beach. Then, as if coming to his senses, he twists and flails and bellows, Take her, you idiot, not me. I'm an Ensley. His fury seems to confuse them. The one gripping her relaxes his hold as if he's about to help with Floyd, and Jessie tears herself free, kicks off her bareback shoes, and flees back up between the tents, expecting at any second that a hand will grab her, pull her down, her fear so certain that she cries out when she reaches the car. She yanks open the door and dives inside, knocking Floyd's folded shortcut map onto the floor. The sky above the tents has grown darker, uglier. The thick mass of clouds is shot with lightning and yellowish green on the underside. She's lived in the Midwest long enough to know the threat of such clouds. It's nature's existential version of the two batrachian creatures that have caught up with her. She locks the doors. One of them reaches his fingers through the vent window, and she grabs the window knob and pushes hard, crushing his fingers between frame and glass. He screeches and tugs to free himself. She only relents when she sees the other one trying to snake his arm all the way in through the passenger vent. The nearest creature tears himself free, stumbling back hard. Floyd has left the keys in the ignition, as he always does. Jessie starts the car. She grinds the gear lever on the column, tries to depress the clutch and shift into reverse. Floyd refused to let her drive. There was, in his opinion, nothing she needed to do or see on her own. And if she even broached the subject, he would accuse her of planning to meet someone secretly, so she learned not to ask. Thus, her experience of driving a car is years unpracticed at best. But finally, the gear catches not reverse, but first. The car lunges forward, dragging along the creature on the passenger side, knocking down the one who's pulled free. The tires thump over him as she steers madly in a circle, digging up the green sward before the right tires find purchase on the dirt path, and the car lurches ahead again. The fingers clinging to the passenger vent window finally slip loose and vanish. In the rearview mirror, everything is darkened, as if storm and roiling lake have converged upon that dock. She manages to shift into second gear as she plunges along, down the narrow road, the storm lost beyond the woods, until a thread of blackness seems to reach out from the lake and flow after her as though eager to attach to the rear of the Packard. In the mirror, it looks to be full of eyes and writhing annelid limbs. At the lake carnival sign, she swings right and speeds back through the deserted town, her eyes flicking repeatedly to the mirror, where the seemingly conscious darkness surges ever closer. As it rolls through the town after her, the buildings appear to flex and bend in toward its center, then are gone. She speeds back along a course she mostly slept through, though she wonders how. The wheels thunder over every packed washboard section hard enough to shake her fillings loose. The maw of darkness yawns right behind her now, almost licking the bumper. The rear of the car stretches away from her. Air roars in her ears. She's yelling and doesn't even know it, flooring the accelerator while her hands grip the wheel so tightly it's a wonder she doesn't wrench it loose from the column. And then quite suddenly, there's a pop, as if she's dropped 1,000 feet. The sun bursts out, the dirt road is oiled and smooth again, and there's another car coming right at her out of thin air. She cries out and cuts the wheel madly, and the Packard fishtails, sliding off the road and down into the woods. Bouncing, flinging her forward too fast to recover, she strikes her head once, twice, and the car comes to a rest between two trees with Jessie sprawled along the bench seat. By the time she sits up dazed and blinking, the other car has stopped, and the driver, a local man in dungarees, has run over to her. "Miss," he says, "Miss, you all right?" She looks at him as if he's speaking a foreign language, closes her eyes. As she reaches up, touches her head. "You got an egg-sized bump there," he tells her. "Maybe we ought to get you to a ranger station, like." "How will I get my car out of here?" "Oh," he assesses the damage. "Well, it don't look too bad. I can maybe back it out for you." I would appreciate it." She opens the door and climbs out, forgetting that she's barefoot until she steps down among the sticks and twigs. Carefully, then, she makes her way up to the dirt. Her feet sink into it. It feels like she's standing on a cloud. The motor starts the engine and gently shifts into reverse, cautiously backs the Packard up along the ruts it's made in flying off the road. He manages to get the car out of the woods. At that point, a local police car arrives. Jessie lets the helpful motorist do most of the talking about what happened. He kindly blames the event on her tires slipping in the oily dirt. They all look back at the ruts of her tires. Impossibly, these only start about 20 feet up the road, as if the car had just been sitting there before leaping forward. It's smooth, oiled dirt beyond that as far as she can see. The policeman has her perched on the front seat with her legs out the door. He kneels and shines a flashlight at her eyes, seems satisfied by her reaction, but says, "You know, it's against the law to drive barefoot." No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I'll get a pair of shoes out of the trunk." "May I ask where you're coming from?" "Oh, I was on my way to a rented cabin on Lake. Oh, there's this shortcut map." She leans down and picks up the folded map off the floor, opens it up. The old sheet of paper is blank, not a mark on it beyond dirty smudges, as if it's been carried around in someone's pocket for years. She masks her dismay, a skill she has long since mastered in Floyd's company. "Oh, I guess this isn't it after all. I wonder where it got to." In any case, he claimed it would save half an hour off the drive, my husband. "Well, that might be so, but I would say right now you should stick to the highway. Can't be sure your car hasn't suffered some undercarriage damage, and I'd hate to think of you stuck on this dirt road and trying to get a tow truck. Anyways, you're only an hour out, even if you stick to the highway." What, she asks carefully, is down that road? The motorist chimes in. A string of cabins. One of them's mine. Not on your lake, but on the way there. About 5 miles along or so. Isn't there a town? The motorist shakes his head. The policeman adds, not for a long while now. Was one back in the 20s, I think it was, that up and vanished. It what? Oh yeah, there it's a near legend nowadays. Folks figured a twister flattened the place, but there's not a trace of it anywhere, and you'd expect there'd be something left since tornadoes hardly ever replace a town with woods. He's all but winking at her to let her know he's pulling her leg a little. He adds, one of my old neighbors, he says that God went and swallowed up a whole lake to boot, used to be there too. But, adds the policeman, what's one less lake around here? He's grinning now. More likely, he said, when the highway got put in, it bypassed the town and the place just died. But people like their stories. She smiles politely. Well, I promise I'll stick to the highway, but I want to thank you, both you gentlemen, for your assistance. I could have been stuck on this road forever. The motorist wishes her luck and drives off, heading on to his cabin, back the way she's come. The policeman waits while she gets a pair of shoes out of her luggage. The rear of the car isn't stretched out of shape at all. Already she's telling herself she didn't really see that. The policeman escorts her back onto the highway. He paces behind her car for about 5 miles before he turns off with a quick flash of his headlights to say goodbye. Jessie drives along carefully, not too fast, no cause to hurry. Every time she looks in the rearview mirror, though, she relives the final glimpse she had of the squirming darkness behind her, flexing like a cheap pie tin and suddenly snapping back as if reeled in on a line. Floyd's trapped somewhere in there now, along with Allende, and she's probably going to have a hard time finding an explanation to provide folks with. But then she remembers him yelling, "Take her, you idiots!" And she thinks she'll find a way. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory.
Sure.
Bleak and brutal and weird and then reassuringly human.
I hope so. Yes.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, it was great.
My pleasure. Thank you. I found it interesting. We have sort of themes here of skinned things going on this evening. I don't know. It seems to run in the realm we write in. I don't know.
Does seem to work that way. There's a lot of interesting harmonies here.
This reminded me of some of the stories in your recent short story collection. There be monsters.
Well, that's in that collection, in fact. It should remind you at least one of those stories, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, thank you both. Next week, our readers are Randy Dawn and Brian Trent. I recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of the reading for any announcements or changes. Storyhour2020.com is also a good place to learn about upcoming authors and see what Story Hour has streamed over the past 5 years. You can watch the programs you may have missed at the Story Hour channel on YouTube. The link's at storyhour2020.com. All the shows from 2020, 2021, 2024, and 2025 are currently there, and we're doing our darndest to move over the rest so fast as our modestly sized all-volunteer staff can manage. Story Hour's YouTube subscribers don't miss a thing. Gregory and Christa, thank you for sharing your stories. What a great night, and what a great combination.
Thanks very much.
We'd also like to thank
you.
Yeah, definitely. We'd like to thank the Society of Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Organization, known affectionately as SIFWA, for helping to fund Story Hour. Thank you to Daniel Marcus, without whom this Zoom room would be a barren and lonely place. And thank you, all of you, for joining us in spinning the fictive dream. Good night from the Story Hour.
Thank you
Bye,
again.
folks.